So I'm reading the biography of Thomas Edison. I've never really done a deep dive into his life. I had some concerns about how he treated Nikola Tesla, and that gets into a discussion about direct current and alternating current and direct current. And in this particular book, it's talking about his childhood, right, his early years. So we're just going to read a little bit about Edison's life. I'm very interested in this next page because it gets into how he treated some of the primary documents. So let's look at this together. So basically, this is about when he moved. So he was named, let's go back here. With new children on the way, Samuel began the next phase of his life. Little Al, named Alva, in honor of Captain Alva Bradley, a family friend and ship owner on the Great Lakes, who had helped the family escape Canada, was the only one of the Milan-born children to survive. Milan seemed like an up-and-coming town. This is in Milan, Ohio, by the way. Seemed like an up-and-coming town. Samuel set up a shingle mill and a feed grain business. He was also an active carpenter and land speculator, successful enough that he built a nice house for his family and was considered quite well off. Like many parts of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois in the early 1800s, Milan was busy with internal improvements, building canals and railroads to open up trade with the more commercially active East Coast. Unfortunately, the expected railroad line was rerouted to bypass Milan, and the village began to fail as grain shippers ignored the town for the new thriving and connected port of Sandusky. With prospects falling in Milan, Samuel decided to uproot his family again and move back to his previous brief stop, Port Huron, Michigan. There he sold lumber, speculated in real estate, and even built an observation tower and sold tickets to tourists eager for a grand view of Lake Huron. So clearly he was involved in different businesses and was trying to meet his family's needs. I think that's an interesting lesson for us. Sometimes in life we have to make changes to meet the needs of our families. We'll talk more about this in our business class in depth in terms of pivoting, right? There are times where you have to pivot. At 7 years old, Edison had his first steamship ride. Almost immediately after arrival, he developed scarlet fever. While he survived the initial illness, he experienced almost constant colds, upper respiratory infections, and perhaps worst of all, given his future invention of the phonograph, a further deterioration of his hearing. So he had had some issues with hearing. It was not easy for Edison to get an education. In the fall of 1854, he was enrolled in the school of Reverend G.B. Engel, a strict disciplinarian who taught by rote. You think of rote and a certain structure. The easily distracted Edison didn't do well under such conditions, and he ran away. The Reverend's wife called Edison addled and dreamy, neither of which was intended as a compliment. Furious, Edison's strong-willed mother pulled him from the school and homeschooled him with a rigorous regimen comprising studying a variety of subjects, reading, literature, and memorizing. Above all, Edison was a voracious reader. With his mother's guidance, he read Gibbon's The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, Hume's History of England, Sears' History of the World, Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy, and the Dictionary of Sciences. Later, during a brief attendance at the Union School in Port Huron, Richard Green Parker's A School Compendium of Natural and Experimental Philosophy fed Edison's growing interest in science. Another favorite book was Carl Fresenius's System of Instruction in Chemical Analysis. He's reading some pretty primary documents, or close to primary documents, some deep stuff. And then he tried to read Newton's Principia, but later admitted it was stymied by the math, which was beyond his capability. With that exception, his excellent memory allowed him to retain virtually everything he read. If ever there was a man who tore the heart out of books, it is Edison, and what has been by him is never forgotten, if useful or worthy of submission to the test of experiment. Let's repeat that. If ever there was a man who tore the heart out of books, it is Edison, and what has been read by him is never forgotten, if useful or worthy of submission to the test of experiment. Early on, Edison displayed a trait that would bode well for his chosen avocation. He questioned everything. Ironically, this led his father to wonder if he was a bit dim-witted. Little Al had to know everything, and he nearly drove his father to exhaustion with his incessant inquiries. One early biographer described young Edison as having the inquisitiveness of a red squirrel. He hung around shipbuilders and asked them question after question about building ships, steam powder, sailing, and whatever else he could think of. To say he was a curious child would be an understatement. Now here's what's crazy. Right here next to me is a book that you might find very interesting. And it's this book, The Life and the World of Sir Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was born in 1642, and if there was one thing to describe Newton's life that was pretty phenomenal, is that he was curious. So Edison could learn certain things from Newton. Now, the part about the Principia and the mathematics, I think that we need to have a Principia club around the world where people just study the Principia and ask questions. I think that might be worth doing. The Principia was written in 1687. I went to Newton's house last year, and I plan to keep that as a regular thing where I'm hoping to do it where I teach the history of calculus at Newton's house. But I went to Newton's house, I went to Newton's college, and I want to encourage people to realize that Newton was an ordinary man who just was very curious. Edison was very curious, but you notice that he didn't have the mathematics to help him understand the Principia, but he still did great work with inventions. Edison is the greatest inventor of all time, according to many standards. But how cool would it be if your child had the mathematics they needed to be able to understand Newton and also to be able to invent, right? So my recommendation to families is make sure your child gets calculus. And we can help with that. Our Counting to Calculus program actually uses some of Newton's work in the program. So parents, reach out to us, countingtocalculus.org. You can sign up for our monthly program, subscription program that allows you to join us and learn with us. Sort of like a live session webinar style, going through all the concepts from Counting to Calculus. We want every child to get to calculus. Okay, let's finish up this section of Edison, and we'll pick it up in the next video, or we'll pick it up in our series later on innovators and inventors. So, to say he was a curious child would be an understatement. Edison was adventurous and inventive. His ability to memorize long passages was illustrated by the ease with which he could acquire and recite all the songs of the lumber gangs and canal men before he was 5 years old. In the days before paving, when streets and walkways turned to mud with the slightest rain, Edison built little plank roads out of the debris of yards and mills. The young inventor's curiosity sometimes got him into trouble. While investigating combustion, he accidentally burned down the family barn, which earned him a public whipping in the town square as a warning to others. Yikes. He lost the tip of a finger to an axe while holding a skate strap for a friend. An irritated ram attacked him while he was digging out a bumblebee nest. He almost drowned in the canal on more than one occasion. He then almost drowned in a pile of wheat in a grain elevator. On one occasion, he was present when a childhood friend, George Lockwood, actually did drown. And that was very sad. Young Edison developed a profound interest in chemistry, building up a collection of some 200 bottles of chemicals in the family basement, duly labeled poison to keep away prying eyes. Visits to local drugstore proprietors and his incessant inquisitiveness made him knowledgeable about most chemicals. He began doing experiments from chemistry and physics books that he got from the local library and had tested to his satisfaction many of the statements encountered in his scientific reading. His experiments made him familiar with the workings of early electrical batteries and the production of current, knowledge that would come in handy in his life as someone who was excellent with electricity. Okay, that's a little bit about Thomas Edison's life. We're going to learn more about life in the 1800s. But where do we go from here? Part of the goal of this reading series is to help me understand why Edison was phenomenal at being a great inventor. I want to raise the next generation of scientists, mathematicians, and thinkers who also know the history and philosophy of science, logic, and theology. That is my goal. So essentially, I want to raise the next generation of Isaac Newtons and James Clerk Maxwell's. And the current education system is not going to do that, so we need to take a different approach by learning from some of the greatest mathematicians and scientists as well. Thanks for watching this video. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and we're going to keep learning and reading about Thomas Edison. Have a blessed day.